Hello, welcome to Train Signal. This is the System Center Operations Manager 2012 Fundamentals lesson in the System Center 2012 Operations Manager training course. You may wonder why anyone would actually use System Center Operations Manager 2012. Well, believe it or not, way back when, there were days when users might accept some IT downtime as a part of the day. There may be systems issues, there could have been a power failure, what have you, but for whatever reason, users were used to be more accepting of IT downtime. However, those days are gone. Today, users demand systems that remain operational, but moreover, businesses demand operations that remain operational as well. Users insist on services that are highly available, very responsive, quickly repairable when problems do occur, and that are working for the business. When there is downtime, it negatively impacts user productivity and it costs companies real money. When there's downtime, it can cost companies hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of dollars per hour of downtime. Therefore, preventing downtime, being proactive and reactive when necessary, is a critical element for every IT department. Downtime can also reduce customer confidence. After all, would you do business with a company whose website is constantly going down, or who's proven that they're not able to keep their own systems available and trust them with your hard-earned dollars? There is an answer to all of your organization's downtime woes. This tool provides up and down monitoring for servers and the network. In other words, it'll tell you if your systems and your network devices are up or if they're down. It can do mission-critical application monitoring. After all, server monitoring is nice, but it's applications that really matter. New in this version of the product is complete network port statistics, so you can get information about how much network traffic is passing through a specific port on your network. And you can get granular monitoring for potential performance issues across all of the applications in your environment. This tool is System Center Operations Manager, as I'm sure you guessed. Now, Operations Manager is just one component of the overall System Center 2012 suite of products. It used to be a standalone component. With System Center Operations Manager 2007, you could buy that product as a standalone tool. You didn't have to buy Configuration Manager or Data Protection Manager along with it. With the 2012 suite, Microsoft has taken all of the previously disparate System Center 2012 components, Operations Manager, Configuration Manager, Data Protection Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, what have you, and combined them into a single suite of products. That said, I would call them a loosely coupled suite of products still. I would imagine at some point in the future they'll become more tightly integrated, but right now with this addition, Microsoft has basically taken the older products, put them together into one suite to sell, but over time I would see them coming more together as a single, more cohesive unit than they are today. Now, why do we call it SCOM and not or SCOM 2012 That's because of legacy naming. The product used to be called System Center Operations Manager. It is now called System Center 2012, and then the subset of that is Operations Manager. People still call it SCOM. They're not going to change it to SCOM 2012 at least I hope they never do. And you should understand that another common shortcut is also Ops Manager, OPS MGR. When you're out having a problem with it or something like that, and you're at Google or Bing and you're saying, I need help with this, if you use the abbreviations SCOM or Ops Manager as a part of your search, that'll help you find information about what you're looking for with regard to Operations Manager 2012. Now again, you probably expect in a new version of the product that there may be some new features, and you would be right. If you're used to older versions of Operations Manager, you may be used to something called the Root Management Server. In the legacy editions of Operations Manager, the Root Management Server was considered a single point of failure in the entire monitoring infrastructure. With Operations Manager 2012, Microsoft has removed the concept of Root Management Server. In fact, all management servers now operate as peers. So basically, when you deploy more than one management server, you basically create a more highly available environment because there's no single point of failure in the environment. However, there are some management packs, and you'll learn about management packs later on in this course if you're not sure what they are yet. There are some management packs that require the use of a root management server. To that end, Operations Manager 2012 includes what's called a root management server emulator role. Sort of like back in the day when there had to be a primary domain controller emulator in order for older Windows machines to work with newer Windows domains, Microsoft has brought an RMS emulator role to Operations Manager to ensure backward compatibility with older management packs that you may bring into the environment. Now, all this talk about what has changed with regard to the root management server in Operations Manager 2012 may make you ask the question, what the heck is a root management server? And in this case, in Operations Manager 2012, the question is, what is a management server? Well, in Operations Manager, management servers administer the management group configuration, administer and communicate with agents that you deploy into the environment in order to keep watch over your servers, and they also communicate with the databases in the management group. So basically, management servers are the hub of your Operations Manager environment. And you can have more than one management server, and they can be pulled together. But they still form basically the central core of your Operations Manager environment. All of the agents that are out in the environment will communicate via management servers, and the management servers and the databases will communicate with each other on a regular basis. Further, when you use the console in Operations Manager, regardless of where it's installed, you're also communicating with a management server. The management server plays the vital role in the Operations Manager infrastructure. One of the things I'm really excited about with Operations Manager 2012 is its comprehensive network monitoring capabilities right down to the port level. In fact, one of the really cool things about it is Microsoft doesn't actually charge you any licenses, no license fee to monitor network ports. Now, you got to pay a license fee for other aspects of Operations Manager, and we'll talk about that later on in this course. But if you're just going to monitor network devices, you don't actually have to pay a licensing fee beyond the server licensing fee that you would pay for the actual Operations Manager software. If you're going to watch something like a Windows server, you're going to have to get a license to watch that Windows server. But that is not the case with network ports. You can watch as many network ports as you want for free with Operations Manager 2012. Applications are the lifeblood of a business. And Microsoft understands that. And they've added much improved application monitoring for a number of different environments in Operations Manager 2012, including Java, JBoss, Tomcat, WebSphere, WebLogic type environments. And they've also, through their AVI code acquisition, much improved .NET application monitoring in Operations Manager 2012. This allows organizations to do application monitoring in addition to all of the hardware type monitoring that they may have always done traditionally. Further, connectors have been removed from Operations Manager 2012. This functionality has been moved to System Center 2012 Orchestrator, which is another component of the System Center 2012 suite. And this is a way that you can sort of automate data center operations through the use of connectors in Orchestrator and lots of other things that come in Orchestrator. There are also some improvements for the administrator. There's an all-new web console, lots of new dashboards for you to view so you can get more at-a-glance pieces of information about what's going on in your environment. There's more integration with SharePoint if you happen to be a SharePoint shop. And there's full PowerShell 2.0 management capabilities. Microsoft has been fast and furiously adding PowerShell capability to all of their products, and Operations Manager 2012 is no exception to this trend. As is the case for just about every piece of software out there, there are some important terminology items you should understand with regard to Operations Manager 2012. First of all, I want to talk about a SCOM agent, a System Center Operations Manager agent. This is a service that's installed on a system. This collects data, compares sample data to predefined values, creates alerts, and runs responses. Basically, this is the software that you'll deploy to the monitored systems in your environment. The SCOM agent is then going to collect information based on management packs that you load on the Operations Manager server. It's going to compare data that it collects to predefined values from those management packs. It'll create alerts if something in those management packs tells it that the information that it's gathered has gone awry, and it'll also run responses in the event that you take corrective action against those alerts. Now again, if you're not sure what a management pack is, we'll be talking about those soon, but basically it's a way to add functionality to Operations Manager. A management group is the basic unit of functionality in Operations Manager, and it consists of a management server, the operational database, and the reporting data warehouse database. This could just be one server, or it could be 3 servers with all of these roles: management server, operational database, and reporting data warehouse database, all installed on separate machines. We'll be looking at all of the roles in Operations Manager later in this course. But at a minimum, you have to make sure to understand that you have to have a management server and then the 2 databases that are listed on the screen. A management pack will define the information that the agents that you deploy to servers collects and returns to the management server for a specific application or technology. Now, just because you deploy an agent to a machine doesn't mean it's actually going to do anything. For example, if you deployed an agent right now at a brand new Operations Manager server and have done nothing to it yet, to an Exchange box, nothing's going to happen. You'll get up-down monitoring of that server. Operations Manager will tell you that that server is up or it's down, but you'll get no Exchange statistics. You'll get no Windows statistics. The reason is because you have to add management packs in order to tell Operations Manager what kind of information you want to monitor with the Operations Manager framework. And that's an important word as well, framework. Operations Manager is very much a bare bones framework. It's really as you add intelligence to the product through the use of these management packs that it becomes sort of the eyes and ears of your organization and can tell you what's going on at a very deep level in the environment. When you add an Exchange management pack to your Operations Manager server, for example, there's all kinds of metrics that are going to be watched on Exchange servers that are discovered in the environment. The management pack will tell any agents that are installed to Exchange servers exactly what to look for, how to look for it, so that you can be sure that you're looking at every possible reasonable aspect of your Exchange server. And there are hundreds of management packs available, and you will see some of them in action in this course. Unfortunately, Operations Manager requires licensing, and there are some choices you need to make with regard to architecture before you simply move forward and buy the product and implement it. As I mentioned, make sure you understand that today you cannot buy Operations Manager 2012 as a standalone product. You must buy a full System Center 2012 license, of which Operations Manager is simply one component of that full System Center 2012 suite. And you can see on your screen a look at all of the other products that make up the System Center 2012 suite. When it comes to licensing, there's one very important piece of terminology that you should understand, and that's operating system environment. This is a Microsoft-specific term. An OSE is basically a single instance of an operating system, and this includes any applications configured to run on it. So basically, it's just the operating system that we're interested in. We're not really interested in necessarily all the applications, although those are wrapped up in the operating system environment. So basically, consider a physical server with Windows and all the applications to be an OSE. In fact, an OSE can be physical or it can be virtual. When you look at a Hyper-V host, that is an operating system environment. It's a Windows instance and it's got stuff running on it. Each individual virtual machine running inside Hyper-V is an operating system environment. And if you look at the diagram, you're going to see that we have a physical OSE here, or a physical OSE in the lower right-hand corner, and because it's running on the hypervisor, and this is the physical operating system environment. We then have 2 virtual machines. Each one of those is a virtual operating system environment. Together, they're just operating system environments generically. That'll come into play soon when you see how System Center is licensed. So there's some other terminology that you should understand. First of all, a role. A role in Operations Manager speak is a discrete set of functionality that's added to an Operations Manager installation. And the intent of a role is to extend the product's functionality. For example, if you add a data warehouse role to a server in your Operations Manager environment, you're adding the data warehousing capability for long-term reporting to Operations Manager. Now, we just talked about an operating system environment, so I won't talk about it again. But then we have clients, and this could be a desktop or an end-user device of some kind. We then have what are called management licenses. This is the Operations Manager client that's assigned to a server or to a managed desktop. When you think about Operations Manager, you're generally considering monitoring servers because you're going to monitor the data center, you're going to monitor critical workloads. There could, however, be a desktop that you want to monitor with Operations Manager as well. Think about point of sale systems. Those are important to keep up and running, so you may want to monitor those with Operations Manager, hence the inclusion of the phrase managed desktop in a management license terminology. But there's more to understanding Operations Manager server licensing. There are a couple of different editions of System Center 2012. First of all, the Data Center Edition is licensed per 2 processors. You can't buy a single processor data center license, nor can you buy a 2-processor data center license and use it on 2 single processor servers. You cannot split the licenses. They go on one server with 2 processors. But why 2 processors? Because just about every server sold today is a dual processor server. So in this way, Microsoft tried to make it a little bit easier by saying we're going to license per 2 processors so that you're not buying on a per processor basis like you used to. You're buying one 2-processor license instead of 2 1-processor licenses. Whether or not that's really easier is really debatable, but the fact remains that it's licensed per 2 processors and they cannot be split among single processor servers. A standard edition is licensed per 2 managed operating system environments. So if you buy a standard edition of System Center 2012, you can monitor 2 operating system environments, basically the host and 1 virtual machine. With the Data Center Edition, you can monitor as many virtual machines as you can fit on that host. If you have 4 hosts with dual processors each, you would need to buy 4 dual processor licenses, but you could monitor every workload that's running on those 4 hosts. You do not need to buy individual licenses for the individual OSEs. As an example, suppose you have a 2-processor server with 1 operating system environment. You'd have to buy 1 management license or 1 standard management license. So you'd have to buy either 1 data center management license, which would allow you to monitor based on per processor, or 1 standard management license. If you were to purchase the data center license in this case, it would be $3,607. Or you could buy the standard license, which is $1,323 per OSE. Now, bear in mind that there is 0 functionality difference between the Data Center Edition and the Standard Edition of System Center 2012. Both suites include the same products, it's simply how they're licensed is very different. This chart can be a little confusing, so let me explain. You're not buying both. You're not buying both a Data Center Management License and a Standard Management License. You are buying either or. So in this case, you may want to buy a Data Center Management License if you know you're going to add more virtual machines to the host. Let's go to the bottom. You have a 4-processor server, so it has 4 processors in it, but you're running a 16 operating system environment. So you're running, say, 16 virtual machines or 15 virtual machines plus the host. In this case, you would have to buy 2 data center management licenses because there's 4 processors. Remember, a single data center management license covers 2 processors, hence 4 processors requires 2 data center management licenses. Or you'd have to buy 8 standard management licenses because remember, each standard management license covers 2 OSEs. In this case, you're much better off buying the data center license rather than the standard license. In fact, to buy the data center license, you're spending $7,214 at list price versus $10,584 for the standard edition. Here's a huge caveat. Never just buy the software. Always talk to your Microsoft licensing rep before making significant purchases. Again, you cannot split management licenses across multiple servers. And when you look at a break-even point for where it makes more sense to buy a data center management license than a standard management license, it's once you have about 7 virtual machines running on a host. After that point, it's actually less expensive to just buy the data center licenses and be done with it than to continue to rack up costs to add standard management licenses. One nice thing with Operations Manager is you don't have to buy separate SQL Server licensing. All System Center 2012 products include the right to run a runtime version of SQL Server technology, SQL Server Standard Edition. This edition of SQL Server is restricted to use by System Center 2012 components. So you're not allowed to stand up the SQL Server environment and then run some sales application against it. This SQL Server must be dedicated to System Center 2012 use. High availability is supported using System Center 2012 dedicated SQL instances. So you are allowed to use high availability as long as these are being used in SQL Server, as long as everything's being used to support the System Center environment itself. So what are the roles that are available to you in Operations Manager? Now, in alphabetical order, we're going to take a look at what you see on your screen. We have what's called an Audit Collection Services Collector role. This is going to receive and process events from what are called ACS forwarders and send that information to ACS database. An audit collection system basically collects different pieces of information from clients and then puts it into a database for later review. The kinds of information collected by Audit Collection Services is typically security related. Audit Collection Services centralizes the gathering of login successes and failures in the organization so that you can get a centralized look at exactly what's happening with regard to user access in the Operations Manager or in the monitored environment. This can be a very powerful tool when it comes to tracking down potential security related events down the line, particularly if you have a breach of some kind. The ACS database is a central repository for events that are generated by an audit policy within an Audit Collection Services deployment. A forwarder is a part of the Operations Manager agent itself. This is actually installed along with the agent. This will submit ACS information to ACS collectors. This is the piece that's responsible for collecting information from a client to be sent off to the ACS database. We then have a core piece of technology in Operations Manager called the Operational Database. This is a SQL Server database that contains all configuration data for the management group and stores all monitoring data that is collected and processed for the management group. All the information in the operational database is really short-term information and is retained for 7 days. The Operations Console is where the administrator does most of his work. This is the administrative console that you'll use, and you'll spend a lot of quality time with Operations Manager through this tool. A management server is a part of a management group, and this is basically how managed systems will communicate with the Operations Manager hierarchy. Those systems will communicate with a management server, and then all of their information will flow from a client to a management server into the operational database so that administrators can be kept aware of what's going on in the environment. If you're wondering what happens after 7 days once information leaves the operational database, well, that's where the data warehouse database comes in. This is a separate SQL Server database that stores monitoring and alerting data for historical purposes. Information written to the Operations Manager database is also written to the data warehouse database, so reports are always going to contain current data. However, the data warehouse database will retain long-term data in addition to short-term data. Now, the big difference is when you're going to run reports or get information against the operational database, it'll be faster than the data warehouse database. Now, there may be more data, but it's fewer days worth of data, but that's by design. It keeps Operations Manager running quite nimbly, whereas the data warehouse may take a little bit more time to generate historical data that you may want to use for analysis purposes. A reporting database is a SQL Server database that holds reports, and you'll be seeing that in this course. The reporting server is a SQL Server system from which operational reports are run for Operations Manager. Operations Manager also comes with a web console, which is included as a part of the web console server. And I mentioned before that Operations Manager has adopted PowerShell. Well, that's the command shell role that we'll be looking at later in this course. Now, not everything you want to monitor is going to be inside the Windows Trust Zone. In order to monitor things outside the environment, that's where a gateway server comes into play. This allows agent management of computers that are outside the trust zone of the local Active Directory group. For example, you may want to monitor items in an untrusted domain. You can use a gateway to accomplish that goal. And that brings us to the end of the fundamentals lesson. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.